Enrichment Series. We are happy that you've joined us today. My name is Pastor Lauren R. Hodnett, and I'm your host for today. We apologize for the sound difficulties that we've had, but that just emphasizes in our mind that the enemy is busy, and this is information that somebody out there needs to hear today. Let's Talk Life Enrichment Series is a ministry initiative of the Ebenezer Seventh-day Adventist Church. We're in Augusta, Georgia, and we plan a series of webinars to address some of the issues that we face in our day-to-day lives. You'll hear some things in the coming months on health, finances, um, also family life. And today we want to talk about a subject that is really germane to what many of us are dealing with in the age of this pandemic, and that is COVID and mental health. And so today we have assembled a dynamite panel uh, to, 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 to guide us through our discussion. And our facilitator today, and this panel will be led by our facilitator, Dr. Martin Hodnett. Dr. Hodnett was born in Loma Linda, California. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree in psychology at Oakwood College and later a master's degree and a doctorate in psychology at University. He has been a part of the faculty in the Department of Psychology, Psychological Sciences at Oakwood University, Psychology, Psychological Sciences at Oakwood University. All right. We had a little feedback there. But Dr. Hodnett is a graduate of the wonderful Oakwood College, and he earned his master's and doctorate degree in psychology at Loma Linda University. He's been a part of the faculty in the Department of Psychological Sciences at Oakwood University since 2010 and has served as chair of the department since 2015. His focus is on helping others to know the practical, life-changing power of Christ to renew the human mind. And so, Dr. Hodnett, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm just going to turn it over to you, and you can introduce our panel and begin our discussion.
Thank you so much, Pastor Hodnett. It is indeed a pleasure for me to be here with you this afternoon. And today we have a special program that I believe is specific and really needed for this particular time. Now, over the past year, most of us know that it has been a challenging one. Since the pandemic began, many of our lives have shifted in ways that we really couldn't have imagined previously. A year and a half ago, most of us didn't know the terms social distancing and sheltering in place. Now, these terms have a real experiential meaning attached to them for each of us. Over the past year, we've seen our churches and schools emptied, while many of our hospitals have been operating at a frenzied pace and inundated with patients. Previously, many of us took for granted simple things like walking to the store without a mask, or maybe gathering together with friends after church for a dinner or potluck. And yet, in spite of all the challenges, changes, and uncertainty we faced, we haven't done it alone. God has been faithful. And although some of our loved ones are now asleep, awaiting Christ's return, many of us remain and are still here. We, by God's grace, are still here. After 1 year and 548,000 deaths nationally, and 2.76 million deaths internationally, we are still here. And yet, in spite of all that's happened, the pandemic isn't yet over. Although we are still here, many of us are asking questions like, how do we adaptively move forward with the challenges, changes, and uncertainties that we still have to face on a daily basis? How can we cope with the new realities and the new normals that we are faced with each day. Today, I want to introduce to you a panel that I believe it has been chosen for such a time as this. And we're going to talk with several mental health professionals and learn about the different challenges that many of us are facing to our emotional well being, as well as various ways to adaptively address them. First, we have Hadia Dubose Smith. Ms. Smith, Dubose Smith is originally from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. She is a graduate of Oakwood University and is currently completing a PhD in counseling psychology at Andrews University. This summer, she will graduate with her PhD and proceed with her career. She has a passion for bringing mental health resources to people of color, and as she understands it, mental health is directly relevant to growing in wisdom and stature and in favor of God and man. So we welcome you this afternoon, soon to be Dr. DeBose Smith.
Thank you.
Next, we have Troy Reginald Wise. He's a licensed clinical social worker with only over 20 years of experience in mental health. And in addition to his years of working in multiple facets of the field, he is currently working as a clinical therapist specializing in anger management and relationships. He is a founder and CEO of Aspire Counseling and Consulting Services. Mr. Wise is a graduate of the Ohio State University with a master's degree in social work. He's been married for 15 years and he is a proud father of two beautiful daughters. Welcome, Mr. Wise. Next, we have Pastor Johnny Williams and Dr. Alicia Williams. I'll first start with Pastor Johnny Williams. He's a product of Edgefield County, where he was born and raised. After graduating from the Strom Thurmond High School, he spent several years in the armed forces and has earned various degrees throughout his career, including master's degree in professional counseling from Webster University, a master's degree in pastoral ministry, and a master's of divinity from Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan. Currently, he's employed with the Edgefield County School District as director for alternative school programs, and he works as a part-time chaplain with hospice in Augusta, Georgia. He has worked throughout his career in various capacities as a professional counselor, substance abuse counselor, spiritual advisor, and adjunct professor. We welcome him and thank you for joining us today. Next, we have Dr. Velma Alicia Butler Williams, and she's been an educator for over 30 years, or almost 30 years, I'm sorry, and she has held multiple positions in the education sector. Currently, she's serving as lead school guidance counselor coordinator, and also she is a writer, editor, and a motivational speaker. Originally from Trenton, South Carolina, Dr. Butler Williams, like her husband, graduated from Strom Thurmond High School, and she later attended USC, that is, I believe, University of South Carolina, Aiken, where she graduated with a BA in English and Writing, and she also earned a Master's of Education in School Guidance Counseling and an education specialist degree and a certificate of advanced graduate study in educational administration from Cambridge College, as well as other certificates for at-risk populations. Currently, she has a doctorate degree in educational administration from Argosy University. So we welcome both of you, and we're happy to have everyone here on the panel today with us. Now, at the outset, I want to start out by just letting those who are watching know that the topics discussed today are intended as a public service and are not intended to identify, diagnose, or treat individuals. We will give you a number later if indeed you want to follow up or pursue further information on how you can find out more or get your own personal therapist in your area, and we'll be showing that information later in the program. So let's begin. I want to start out by asking each of you on the panel today a question. And one of the things that we often deal with as we're looking within those who attend churches is that for many people, at least historically, we've been told that Christians should pray about everything. And so, as a Christian, my question to each of you is, Is prayer enough? And if not, what other things should Christians do in order to take care of not only their physical health, but also their mental health? Let's start with Mr. Wise.
Oh, all right. Yes. Should we pray? We're church folks, right? Yes, we should pray. But I also think that faith without works is dead. So between the two of them, you kind of got to pick and choose, I guess, what you want to do. But I think that it's I always say when it comes to anything else in life, whether it's school or whether you're coaching, whether you're getting some motivational speaker, someone to help you out or something, like if it's gonna make us money, if it's gonna do things like that, then we don't just pray about those things. We pay for it. Some people have their kids in sports, they're paying to get them to the next level. But when it comes to our mental health and when it comes to our relationships, I think we have the tendency to put that in the prayer pocket, and we don't focus on the work. We don't focus on the collaborations, and we definitely don't focus on the therapy, I don't think, the way that we should. And I think we really missed the mark with that. There is value in the counsel of a number of people, more than one, more than yourself. The counsel of the godly, is that what they say? And so I think that there's value. Sometimes, preachers, each one is different, but it's like, they're getting flooded. And it's like, when we're talking about sexual abuse and things like that, it's like, look, I want to help you out, but, you may need to go see somebody else. So I think that sometimes we do the church a favor, to pray, but also to get some support. I think it's good to get it all. Get it from your pastor, get it from your loved ones, get it from prayer, but definitely get you some mental health support when it's needed.
Yes, I like that how you put that mental health support. Absolutely, absolutely. I'm going to just pivot to Pastor Johnny and Dr. Williams, and maybe if you guys could chime in, and then followed by Miss Smith.
Yeah, I think there's other things that we can do besides just pray. I think we have to take care of our mental health, and that entails um, going for walks, finding ways to alleviate stress because jobs can be very stressful. And oftentimes we get so bombarded with the cares of this world that there's little, very, very time to pray. Even when we do pray, we don't feel like praying because we're so frustrated. I think that's a trick of the enemy. We have to make sure we take time for ourselves and nurture our mental health. Some of the things I do when I leave, I listen to gospel music, I meditate, I go to work, interact with my coworkers, I talk to my wife. We pray every morning before I get to work. That's something we do as a ritual. But there's things that we have to do to take care of our mental health, as I stated earlier, is making sure that we are exercising stress management, utilizing other resources to help us to have a different perspective and look at life from the perspective that we're in a pandemic, but what can we do to curtail some of the issues that we've been dealing with that has overwhelmed us as a people? And one of the things I've learned is we need each other. Even though we have social distance and whatnot, we have to find ways to communicate with those who we can talk to on a personal level about what we're going through, what we're feeling, how we feel about this pandemic, and being vulnerable, being honest with how we really feel. I think that is paramount to us dealing with this pandemic and dealing with our stress level. So I think we need to make sure that we connect with others as well, people that we can be vulnerable with, people that we can talk to and open up to, and hopefully we can find some solution to some of this stress that we're dealing with, and then learn to spend time with God in prayer and pray about the people that we talk to. I think that's important. So there's a lot of other things that we can do that are tangible that we can control and also help us to deal with our stress level better than what we're doing.
Well, part of my study this morning dealt with Philippians 4 and 6, which just tells us not to fret about anything, but with prayer and supplication, we submit our wants and our needs to God. And from the standpoint of prayer and counseling, I always think that we all know that Jesus was the greatest counselor. So I take that with me when I go to school because that's my mission field. And there are people who are bombarded by so many issues that have been exacerbated by COVID not just the students, but the teachers and the faculty and the staff as well. So what would I say about is prayer necessary? I believe walking, talking, breathing, laughing. I have the corniest sense of humor, but I promise you, every morning with those students, I mean, I had green hair last week and the children thought it was hilarious, but my hair really wasn't dyed. I mean, I direct the programs for the complex. So who I deal with range from 3K all the way to folks who really believe that they're growner than I am. So instead of me having physical tattoos, I tell them I've got hair tattoos now. I let my little gray show, so they laugh about that because they call me everything and anything. And all the while they're calling for me, I'm praying for them. So I have to walk it. I laugh with them. I pray with them, for them. I do have some students who ask for prayer, believe it or not. Um, but just the laughing, the talking, the sharing, those things are part of the supplications that we give for God. So to God about others. So yeah, is prayer important? Yeah. But just like brother said, prayer without works is dead. I'm a foot soldier with cute shoes. That's what I always say. We
Okay.
gotta walk this thing.
All right.
In terms of my thoughts about the question, is prayer enough? It really takes my mind to just the function of prayer, and how much prayer um, allows us to tap into the power that is readily available and accessible in God and in Christ. Um, and just the reality that through prayer, we're reminded that God is the one that provides for those needs and those petitions that we take to Him. And He provides through different tools that He gives us. And really learning to master mental health and to arrive at a place of being able to surrender your own will and being able to bring every thought into subjection. That's not something we're just born knowing how to do. So He has given us tools to be able to learn those things, to become educated. So I think that prayer is enough in the sense that it gives us access to power to be able to utilize those tools that God is refining in us as we grow, even into eternity. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I think I appreciate those answers from each of you. Now, I'm curious that for each of us, we may have seen different things with regard to um, our experience, particularly in our faith communities. I know here where I am in Huntsville, Alabama, the churches were closed. I know in other conferences, such as there, um, in I believe Augusta, the churches are closed as well, and other places across the country. And I know that can really impact people with regard to their um, well, several things. Not only their spiritual well-being, but also their ability to connect with other people and receive social support. And I'm wondering, Pastor Williams, if you could kind of just speak about that, and maybe ways that in this time where we are no longer able to connect in the same ways that we have previously, how we can go about maintaining and nurturing our emotional as well as spiritual well-being during this time.
Well, with the Washington Church, what we're doing twice a month, we have drive-in services. And I think we started back last year, and it has really proven to be quite effective. I mean, we are reaching out to the community. It's a community outreach initiative. People are responding. People often tell me when we're done with service that, I enjoyed the sermon today. I really enjoyed coming here today because I was sitting home today just depressed, having all these thoughts going through my mind. And this sermon really ministered to me. And so we can see the effectiveness of having drive-in services and just being creative and just giving people hope in the midst of a pandemic. And so I think if leaders are going to be more creative, that's one of the things that they should start thinking about. How can we reach our community in the midst of a pandemic? And I think that is one effective tool that we've been using. We do online services twice a month as well. For those who do not want to come out to drive-in services, they have access to the 3:15 service we do every week. if we're not doing drive-in services. So there are ways to connect with the community, and I've spoken to some members, and people are dealing with a lot of stress. They're dealing with grief issues. They're dealing with the grief of not being able to socialize. We don't just look at grief from one aspect. We look at grief from different aspects. Grief just not just deals with losing a loved one. It could be the loss of a social connection. Of course, we haven't been to church in a while, so now people are finding ways to communicate. And I notice that people need that dialogue. They need to talk to someone about what they're going through. And so we're dealing with a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety about this pandemic. Folks are afraid. So there's a lot of questions out there, but we are providing opportunities for people to socialize and to connect with a pastor, with some church members, with our drive-in services. And I think that is something that we need in our community, to make sure that we are reaching out to those who perhaps would not even go to a church service were it not for a drive-in service. So I think that's something that we need to start thinking about, being more creative in terms of how we can reach people where they are.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. And I'm wondering if any of the other panelists have any suggestions or ways that we should really look at connecting or being connected. Any suggestions on how we can connect and remain socially engaged with those around us? I know for several people, particularly some of our elders in our communities, it can be much more difficult dealing with some of the challenges they face as they are no longer able to connect in the same ways that they had previously. So any suggestions from some of our panelists?
One thing I can think of right off that seems to be really populating well is community. Um, Community from the aspect of just being able to network with people, talk to people. And, we were doing, we did a panel not that long ago, and it was with children, and well, they weren't children, but they were teens and young adults. And I saw exchanges like, this is the most social interaction that I've had in a long time. And they were begging the panel member to set up a group so that they can talk about those various concerns that were going on. And so, you have paid groups that are available. You have things like, um, you have paid groups that are available just based on something that you enjoy doing. You've got men's groups, you got women's groups, you got knitting groups, you got all kinds of stuff. A lot of this stuff is, you can find it on Facebook and things like that. But sometimes you can just log in and find something that you're interested in. And many times there's other people that have your same struggle. And that's the power of community, is just being with someone who is experiencing the same thing that you are, who has the same goals that you have, and being able to just, in a sense, distract your mind. A lot of what we do as mental health professionals, right? A lot of the therapies that we use is really kind of just distracting people from their thoughts. And you can do that in so many different ways. So community, I think, is one that's really becoming a big deal with this pandemic.
Sure, absolutely.
Want to say one other thing that we do at the Washington Church when we do have drive-in services is that we've got a family that feeds people, and it ends up looking like a big old picnic, because at the end of service, well, before service, we give out cards asking them specific things like, do you need prayer, or would you like more information, or can you give me your email address or your phone number so we can contact you, or you can contact us. Then they also get the sermon notes, because we're outside, sometimes sound is a little different as traffic goes by, but they have like study notes. And that's my old English teacher spin on everything. You teach somebody something, but you do it more than one time. They can see it, they can hear it, and now they can read and study it. The things that we do in the school system that I find very effective with my students is that it's just what we would call talk therapy, but the children they just like to get together and talk. And because everything has just been so socially distanced, I've got enough space outside that I can take them outside, or we we can scatter in the gym and space 6 feet apart and just sit down and we can talk. And that's all they want to do. I have girls groups, and then I have boys groups. So they just want to talk. And online as well. They can appoint, they like to boss me around. They set up appointments. They send me emails and say, they call me Mama Doc, y'all. Mama Doc, can we talk? Or we're having an issue. Can we get together? I'm having an issue with these 3 people. Can you sit in the middle and talk with us? And then it usually is almost nothing to us adults, but it's something to them. And most children just want people to see them. That's all. Don't tell them that we love you. They just want to know, do you like me still? Do you see me? Am I relevant? Do you care? For the women's groups that I like to involve myself with, one that I've always liked is Have a Little Walk with Jesus, the exercise group. So it's a group of women that get outside and they walk and they pray and they talk. They walk at different paces, but that's, as the group leader explains, that's how life is. Whatever our prayers are, sometimes you've got long prayers, short prayers. Nobody really cares. We're outside walking and exercising, relieving stress. And then online book clubs. There are so many online book clubs for young and old. Something else that I do for the smaller children is that I read books for them to play at night, for parents, stories for the children. And I'm, of course, a little animated and I have stuffed animals. So those things help as much as possible, but they do help.
Okay. All right. I just want to pivot a little bit and ask Ms. DeBose Smith a particular question. And it's related to one of the things we've been noticing, at least here where I am, that initially the numbers for African Americans in terms of the death rate was about on par with everyone else. But the issue was we only make up a small ratio or small amount of the population. So clearly, the amount of African Americans who were dying due to COVID was much higher proportionally. And so I'm wondering, what are some of the unique ways that COVID has impacted the mental health of African Americans? And after she finishes, some of you, if you wish, you can jump in as well.
So there are a lot of different factors that play into why those numbers look the way they do. One being that African Americans tend to have larger household sizes on average. That's kind of a factor that plays in as a starting point. Additionally, there were already disparities in terms of access to adequate health care prior to the pandemic. So you have that happening in the midst of a lot of really openly discussed racial tension and other things going on. So a lot of very active participation in very collective movements. You also have a lot of tendency among this particular demographic to, given the history, distrust services, so not to seek out resources until issues are acute, whether that's physical health related or mental health related. We tend to kind of present to treatment at a later point and really to try and problem solve on our own until we kind of arrive at this point where we can. Additionally, some of the illnesses that are more prevalent among our community put us at an additional level of risk. So you kind of have all of those things happening together. And given just the history of the African American community, we have larger rates of undiagnosed PTSD than the general population. So when you have that playing in, this history of trauma, all of these different factors, and when you think about how interconnected the African American community is, it's very heavily built on extended kinship networks, which means that the people that are important to me don't necessarily only exist in my household. So when you talk about social distancing, that's a lot more feasible for members of other communities than it is for a lot of African American communities. We also tend to be more concentrated in higher populated areas and in urban settings, right? So that's another thing that puts us at greater risk. And you just have all of these things kind of creating a perfect storm situation, if you will, to where a lot of the mandates that were proposed disproportionately were not feasible to members of the African American community. And yeah, just all of those things, it really does reinforce this sense of, until you start to consider all those different factors, you could brush this off as just like, oh, well, they're doing something wrong, and not really see that culturally there are a lot of different things that play into this, not all of which are just a matter of choice, or, decision or anything like that. When you specifically look at mental health, there's also the acknowledgement of, with kind of managing all of the loss that has come with COVID, all of the separation that has come with COVID, the additional pressure to engage the healthcare system, right? And not having that built-in support from the community, right? A lot of churches have been closed. That is a very large part of the African American support system, right? So you have all of these different institutions that have acted as resources for us for resilience, for managing, that have taken really big hits over the course of COVID. And it's put us really in a position of having to manage things a lot more independently, which historically has not been where our strength has come from. So yeah, that's kind of my initial thought to that. I don't know if any other panel members want to add from there.
Well, I can certainly agree with Ms. Smith about what it looks like demographically for us in a small county. I'll give you a for instance. Last week, we had a couple that had been married for over 60 years. The mother died on a Friday night, and the father died Saturday by noon.
Mm.
The couple were aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters to, it affected at least 10 households at our school. So it is huge. I mean, how do you attend to all of that grief? In the midst, in the neighboring county, a 6th grade student committed suicide, who was kin to at least 3 students in our school. Then we had, I mean, it's just compacted. And then it affects the attendance of our students,
Sure.
which we all know that COVID is just slashed up our academics. And then the social emotional piece of the learning of our students, all of that. So it takes students back at least 2 weeks in learning every time there is an impact of COVID, whether it is a death or whether it is just illness.
Okay.
So it is very compounded.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. I want to ask Mr. Wise about something related to what Ms. DeBose mentioned. She was mentioning that there's oftentimes within the African American community there are higher incidents of PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. And I'm wondering, we oftentimes are dealing with unresolved traumas, secondary in some cases to systemic racism and other ways that plays out in our lives. And I'm wondering, what are some of the ways that you have seen some of your clients dealing with certain anxiety-related disorders, and what are some things that you believe contribute to some of their anxiety? And what can they do perhaps to help manage some of the anxiety that they may be feeling specifically during this pandemic?
Well, yeah, it's a lot of anxiety that has been experienced at this time. If you look at some of the things that primarily will impact us as individuals, in the Black community or any community, when you impact, if you are to try to have some effect on someone's relationships, health, or finances, any one of those can really make it, can cause some challenges. When we're looking at COVID, we're looking at all of those factors, being impacted. And so it does bring a lot of anxiety because many people are losing their jobs. They don't know, how the money is going to come in for tomorrow. And so there's anxiety about that. And look, if you're married, if you're married or not, but let's just say if you're a couple and you're having these type of struggles and the foundation of the home has not been that solid as far as the communication concerns, then we've got some significant issues to deal with, right? And so domestic violence, they say, has had some increases in things like that. And then when we look at like what Hadaya was saying about the impact of African Americans, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name. Africa, I'm Choya, so I got yeah.
Dia, no worries, no worries.
Dia.
There you
Okay,
go.
thank you. All right. And so, we just in our communities, we don't have the resources that are provided in the rest of the communities. And sometimes we have fear about doing this. And even in the Adventist community, sometimes it even gets worse if there's an economic challenge there. And then we're talking about health because we're not as quick sometimes because of misunderstandings to go and seek help from the healthcare system. And so what I have found is that there is a great deal of anxiety. And what I have tried to do is just support my clients with really challenging what they think is the biggest concern that they're having. Because sometimes when we're talking about fear situations, fear kind of just shows up. If I'm afraid that I'm going to lose my job, if I'm afraid about relationship issues, or afraid about health, sometimes it just sits there as just us being afraid instead of us challenging, like, what's the likelihood of this to happen? And I could smack myself in the face on that one because I did experience COVID. Okay. And I'm trying to be realistic, but I did do that. And still, even sometimes when you think of worst case scenarios that can happen, they still do happen. So I tried to not be anxious. One of the worst things that I thought could happen to me having pre-existing conditions is that I get COVID, right? Well, I got COVID. Okay. Well, the second thing on the list was, man, if you go to the hospital, that means you're dead, right? And I ended up in the hospital. So at that point, I just had to just leave it all to Jesus, because it's like, man, I feel like Fred Sanford, if you calling me home, then it's hey, just come get me. You know what I'm saying? It's nothing else that I can do because I was not well educated about what the process was that like a lot of people really coming out. So what I'm saying is that when it comes to fear, some things we just need to challenge, but even without even getting into the psychosocial babble about it, we just need to have faith in God, because that's what got me through the situation. Because sometimes when that mind fades, the body follows. And because I was confident that I felt like the Lord told me I was going to make it through, so that helped. But I was like, hey, if he does it, like the Hebrew boys. So sometimes we have to just challenge fear, but then also put that faith in God and let him handle his business.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now I'm wondering, you mentioned that we can challenge times that we are fearful, and I'm wondering, are there additional things that you would advise our listeners and those who are viewing this? Are there additional things that they can do when dealing with anxieties and fears and worries?
It is. It is. One of the new things that I have been, working on is what we call grounding interventions, and I'm not gonna get deep on that, but man, they're effective. Some of the other hocus pocus that comes with some of that, I don't get into. but but grounding is just simply, you're in a way, again, it's distraction of the mind, and one of the things that I encourage is that sometimes when we start to have fear and anxiety, many problems with probably a majority of our diagnosis that we can get, it comes from stress, which a lot of times is correlated with fear and anxiety. And the thing is that if you were to go manic, or if you were to even the schizophrenics and stress, there's some things there, once you get into that hyper state, sometimes there's no turning back. But if, in talking to a lot of my clients, we discovered that leading up to that, if we could find a way to distract and deter the mind, even with the smallest things, it helps. And so one of the things that I've been using, and any of y'all could look it up online, I think they have one adapted more for the pandemic, but it's a tool, and it's called Pleasant Activities List. And so at any point when you feel that stress kind of building up, they got like about 250 options. Now, that might cause stress in itself for some
Yeah.
of us, like just looking at that, right? But before you start to get stressed, you might need to just narrow down the list, and maybe even if we're real OCD, just type up our own, right? And so that when the things, when that stress starts building, we want to distract our mind. There's some things that I could go into as far as the grounding, but this is just a quick one. It's real easy for anybody. They've got stuff on there like what, calling up a friend. Just call up a friend. That's all you have to do. Because look, if you could get 10 minutes of that thing that's really stressing you, sometimes you only need 10 minutes. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to switch out, but like we could see that even in exchanges and arguments and stuff. Just 10
Yeah.
minutes to not say nothing to that person you're upset with. Then like it's just a whole new situation that you're talking about. It's the same thing with a lot of our anxiety and fears. So if you go and call a friend, surprise them with a favor. They have do my nails. I probably won't be doing that one. Call up a friend about their day. Put lotion on myself, or put lotion, we're sticking with that. And then sorting your clothes and things, like just simple things like that will take your mind off of that bad day when you just saw that the death toll is just shooting up, and you just heard that your cousin got diagnosed with COVID. Man, just go sort out some clothes, call up a friend, take some breath. But you can get that online, Pleasant Activities List. And I find that those type of things, those type of small interventions can save you from a lot of times having to come to therapy.
Okay. Okay. So that helps me then to know some things that I can do functionally, really, to really begin to deal with some of the anxieties that I feel, and maybe even fear. I want to just ask Pastor Williams, I'm sorry. What are additionally? What are some healthy ways that we can cope with stress? We talked about a little bit about anxiety, but many of us have job related stress, family related stress. Initially, when we were put on a shelter in place, or a quarantine order, many people had stressors now because they're having to share the same space with their loved ones, with whom usually they only have to spend a few hours in the evenings or in the mornings or weekends. But now it's a 24/7 proposition. So I'm wondering, what are some things that we can do to cope with stress during this pandemic, even now?
Right. One of the things I had to experience was I had to quarantine for like 11 days. I was on my job. Then I was made privy to the fact that somebody that I was near had COVID, tested positive for COVID. And so I came home, I explained to my wife that I had to quarantine for like 11 days. And so it's kind of funny because, I wore my mask. I continued to cook and do certain things because I told her I didn't have any symptoms. And you don't want to walk in fear. Of course, she didn't fuss while I was cooking in the kitchen with my mask on, but I guess that would benefit her. But there's things that we can do, because it does bring us a lot of stress. The scripture says, laughter does the heart good like medicine. And so we have to find things to lighten up our day, to just interact in a positive way where we can laugh and talk and not allow this situation to get the best of us. I mean, it's not so much, you know, the issue with the pandemic is how we respond to it. It's all about changing your perspective, changing the way you think. Sometimes we resort to catastrophic thinking, which just increases anxiety. We just expect the worst, and I had that issue. I had to struggle with it. I had to pray about that, and go to work. And my wife would tell you, I was like a drill sergeant now, put your mask on. Y'all should be talking and just, all of that. And so you have to learn to just settle down and just think about, okay, when you get home, that should be a safe haven. We should be bringing work home. I just would encourage everybody just to de-escalate before you leave the office. That's what I've learned to do. Sometimes my wife and I have agreed on our way home, we'll talk about work, but when we get home, shut it off. Because now you're bringing all that stress and anxiety home. And sometimes without us being cognizant of it, it's just going to spill over to your marriage. And so we got to be very mindful of the stressors that we bring on our relationships, the stressors that we bring home. And so a lot of things we can do is meditate, go for walks. Another thing is watch what you eat. Your nutrition can bring on depression. I know a lot of times what stress does, stress makes you more comfortable eating foods that you shouldn't be eating. That's what stress does. And we do the opposite of what we should do when we're stressed out. We should be eating healthy, but sometimes we have cravings for foods that aren't conducive for good health. And then that brings on depression. So we have to monitor our nutrition, get some fresh air, go for a walk, meditate, talk to someone, and just have a dialogue and talk about how you feel. I think that's good to have an open conversation about some of the things you have encountered that particular day, and not bring all that stress home, and drink plenty of water. There's things that we can do to curtail the effects of this pandemic from impacting us in a negative way. So I think it's good to be able to think about other resources that you can utilize, like reading a book, something that's, of course, the Bible or some scriptures or a book that helps you to relax, things that's going to help you to relax your mind. I would advise folks not to drink caffeine at night. That's not good. You're only going to make things worse. So just be very mindful of your nutrition, be mindful of your conversations, because sometimes we find ourselves having conversations about work, and we're still talking about work, and we're still talking about work, and we're still talking about work. And before you know it, all that stress is compounding. And then it just make it difficult for you to think and to come up with creative ways to deal with that stress. And so I think it's just learning to just pay attention to your own feelings, your own emotions, and your own triggers, because we all have them. And so when you feel yourself getting stressed out, just remind yourself, I need to de-escalate. I need to take a step back and just think about what I can do differently to help resolve these conflicts I'm dealing with right now. So there's various things we can do to help ward off the stress.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in either with regards to dealing with stressors, particularly maybe even relationship stressors, Troya, or
Yeah, definitely. That's a big one. Relationships. Hey, for the for the people who are married, they're getting too much time with the folks, with their spouse or whatever. And the single folks, some of them seem like they feel like they're not getting enough, because it's social distancing. So, you got challenges on both ends. I do deal with a lot of relationship counseling with marriage and single people. And one of the things that I love, the one that was just mentioned about de-escalating before you leave the office. Now, see, that's a tough one too for some people now, because you don't get that drive home like you used to, man. I miss that drive home because I'm working at home, so my wife knows my hours though. So, but sometimes you have to ask for permission to just get some time. And sometimes, I ain't gonna lie, y'all, sometimes you just got to get away from your spouse, right? And that's not in a bad way. Like my wife, she, just yesterday, she needed some time. And I'm happy to give that time, because look, when you I used to think before, like that, sometimes before when you say talk about, getting some time away, that's like a bad thing. It's a red flag. And no, why do you need time away? No, you actually need your time. Actually, for some people, that's an emotional need. So for some of us, when we get stressed out, we need space, but then the spouse or the other, the person you may be dating is starting to get stressed out because you need space, because their love language is touch and attention and things of that nature. So we have to talk these things out and come up with a plan. Unlike Congress, we have to come together and come with some solutions, like for time and intimacy. So time versus intimacy, you know what I'm saying? And we have to make them work. So I love the thing about the walks. That's another thing that I've been pushing real hard with couples. Because things are real stressed out. Some of you all may not have anybody to watch your kids right now.
Right.
Well, you haven't been on a date for a while. And so if you have a close family member, or like we're fortunate, my mother has been staying with us on Sabbaths. We did Sabbath now this morning, we go a whole hour and a half, and we just, because it might not happen again, unfortunately, during the week, because we get to the hustle and bustle. Real talk, I mean, man, so we have to schedule that time in. But those are some things I think to keep in mind, is just to pull down that stress, is making sure that you're communicating, make sure you're getting on those walks, taking some time away, and yeah. So that's a few.
Okay.
I would like to add a quick piece to, a lot of the time what I encounter with people, and a big challenge that they have with incorporating a lot of the things that you all mentioned, is there's not an awareness of when they need it.
Yeah.
And I think a really big piece of being able to cope well and manage stress well is being able to recognize when you're stressed. For a lot of us, there's this sense of, oh, okay, well, everything was good, and then I snapped. And the thought is that, oh, the moment at which I wasn't managing was the moment in which I snapped. No, that was just the point at which it was kind of that threshold place. And really, for all of these different strategies that they've mentioned, it's best if you can think about this in terms of a lifestyle rather than an event, right? Because ultimately, managing stress is daily. We encounter stressors daily, and being aware of your own personal warning signs of, it could be the days when I don't make the bed. It could be when my laundry starts to pile up. It could be when I'm a little bit more irritable. Being aware of your own, ways in which you are carrying stress. It could be just when there's that tightness in your chest or that little throb in your neck. Being aware of those things and saying, you know what, this is the moment at which I need a walk. This is the moment at which, I need to paint my nails. This is the moment at which I need to step back, can really be a game changer in terms of being able to use these strategies effectively. So.
Okay. Thank you. Those are excellent.
One thing I want to add, Dr. Martin, we have to remember that our actions are a product of our thoughts. So our thoughts and our moods are interrelated. So, that's how, we deal with issues with depression, because of what we are thinking about. So we have to be very mindful of those triggers, like she just suggested earlier. It's just be mindful of what your triggers are, so the way we think and could ultimately alter our mood. So, if you're thinking about something that's negative, you're already going through a lot of stress. Like you said, you're thinking someone's out to get you. I was on my way this morning to see a client, and a police officer, I'm telling you, I thought he was following me. But I guess he had the same thing in his GPS. And so as I was turning, I said, Lord, cover me in the blood of Jesus. I started praying. And because every turn I took, he took. So that's, I got to start thinking like that. Maybe he's just going to the gas station. Sure enough, he went to the gas station. I went left. But this stuff creates a lot of panic, man. We just got to be very mindful of, how we think.
Absolutely. Yeah, he could have been an angel in disguise, and he was actually following you to protect you.
Yes, sir.
Who can say? Now, unfortunately, we're running out of time today, but I wanted to let our viewers know that if you have some questions, we're going to do our best to try to squeeze some in and answer them. So if you put them in the chat of the respective streaming service that you're using right now, we'll do our best to answer some of them. And as the first question that I need to pivot to just briefly is, what do I do? Someone's asking, what do I do if I have a friend or family member who is talking about suicide? And in a little bit, we're going to give a number that you can call. But what should a person do if they have a loved one speaking about suicide? How should they respond to that?
I would say refer them out to a mental health professional, encourage them to seek some counseling and follow up with them to make sure they're okay mentally, because at that point they're reaching out for help. And so I would strongly encourage them to reach out to a mental health professional, and so that way they can get the assistance they need.
Okay, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I just want to add, I think there's this false sense that when people talk about suicide sometimes, or if they've talked about it at multiple points, that it's just attention seeking. And I want to encourage people not to fall into that myth of thinking that it's just attention seeking, because even if someone is seeking attention in that way, there's the question of why.
Exactly.
And I would not make it your responsibility to assess, that type of thing. So very much in line with what Pastor Williams said.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing up that point. I'm glad you brought that point up, because sometimes people do minimize others' mental or emotional pain, and really think that they're just attention seeking. But really, as Mr. Bo Smith said, that's not really something that we want to get into uh, judging. We need to make sure that they have the necessary help that they need. And to that point, I want to ask, for many within our community, African American community, there has not typically historically been a strong support of counseling or going to therapy. In many cases, from what I've observed, is that we typically have relied heavily on our spiritual leaders within the community. And so for some of us, this may be a new concept or new thing that we're pursuing is, okay, if I go to therapy, what then should I be looking for? So I'm putting this question to you. If a person is looking to get into therapy, what are some things that they should consider when selecting a therapist, and what questions perhaps should they ask to determine if it's a good fit?
I think
And if
one of the first pitfalls that I've seen some people fall into is having really strong preferences for a therapist and not acknowledging those. So then kind of walking into a situation where it doesn't match what you want, it doesn't match your preferences, you kind of write it off as, well, counseling doesn't work. Right. I really encourage people, it's okay to have preferences. It's okay to want something. Of course, balance that against your needs, right? If you have imminent needs, but it is okay to have a preference in terms of wanting a therapist that looks like you, or wanting a therapist of a certain gender, or wanting to be able to do in person at this point versus virtual, right? Being honest with yourself about what those preferences that you have look like, and communicating them when you seek services is very fair. It's very fair, in much the same way that you get to decide what type of physician you go to, right? We're allowed to have those preferences. So that would be a really big thing in my mind.
okay,
I would say that it's important to know a lot of times there's a little bit of fear once you are thinking about doing that, because a lot of times we don't face our problems because we have a fear of what's on the other side, so we don't talk about it. But I can't speak for other counselors, but in many cases, therapy is much like a conversation. You're kind of just communicating and finally getting the opportunity for someone to actually hear and care about you. Whereas many times where you may have been and what you may have been experiencing, you're used to people having maybe an opinion that doesn't necessarily support your need. But in therapy, we as therapists, we try to listen to what you have to say, and then come up with a plan on how to, engage in that. Another thing is specialty. You know, um, some of us are kind of like the jack of all trades, and some of us have specialty. Some of us work more with children. Some of us work more with couples. Some of us work, just different areas. So you may want to kind of research, and I think some resources are going to be offered, but you may want to kind of research, you know, the specialty of your therapist. It's kind of hard in therapy to kind of get a referral because nobody really a lot of times wants to say that, hey, go here because they were good therapists. Like, because they don't want to get that effect of, oh yeah, you were in therapy. But that's changing as well, because well, normally with things you could just say, hey, well, just go ask somebody. But and this is the thing too, this is a big one, I feel, is that you may go to a therapist and the reality is it may not work out. They may not be the person for you. I mean, how difficult sometimes is it for us to talk to somebody where we really feel like that we can vibe and talk about things we've never talked about in our lives. But that's not a reason not to go, because guess what? If it doesn't work out, there's other therapists. You don't want to spend your whole life just kind of dealing with something where it may have been a little bit something on the front end you have to deal with, but then once you find that sweet spot with that person you need to be with, it could change your whole life. So that's some things that I think to think about in looking for a therapist.
Absolutely.
Say from the school perspective, a unique thing that our school system offers and many school systems offer is that you have both a school counselor as well as a mental health counselor. So we're in the same department. We have that person on campus with us. So what usually happens is, because the school counselor sees the student, interacts with the student most, sometimes the student feels most comfortable with that counselor. But counselors, depending upon your certifications, need to know what their scope of practice is. So what it is that we do as counselors, we talk to each other, we communicate with each other regarding assessments. And I have to share with teachers that they have to, and I don't want to say stay in their lane, but if they hear something, we try to tell our whole community in school that if you see something, you say something, but you also need to know how to refer to the person who's best equipped to deal with those issues. So it's a concerted effort to get those students the help that they need. And parents then will sometimes call and ask for a reference to another counselor. So I have to tell them that I don't do therapeutic counseling. I have conversations. I do a lot of talk therapy, make people comfortable. I've even had some ask me if I would sit in with their counseling sessions with the mental health counselor. And I will tell them I can lead you there, but there are some things that I can share, but I don't, it's just all in how comfortable everyone is in that setting. But I like the fact that I'm like a liaison in helping students and parents feel more comfortable. But I do assess students. I have to look at them to assess if they say something. The technology department in the school system helps us as well. They flag activity on those Chromebooks. So the other day, I got a I hate myself collage. A student had put together so many different ways that he hated himself that his parents could not get into his Chromebook. But I got a flag. I pulled that student. We sat and talked, and he opened up, and all of these things fell out of his mouth. And at the end, he said, Dr. Williams, I feel so much better because I got to talk. And I asked him, who else do you share that with? And he said, no one. So we get a lot of that at the school level, and it is our responsibility to understand what our scope of practice is and when to refer, when to hold it, and when to refer.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And it's good to know that we have representation in our school districts, and we also have places to go, therapists in various places. And so it's my hope that as a community, the more we see that we do have people who look like us, who share our concerns and our experiences, and can relate to the experience of being Black in America, that we can make the most of these resources. Unfortunately, our time is gone for the day, but I want to just thank each of our panelists for joining us today and bringing your expertise and viewpoint and sharing some of the information and tips and things that we can apply to make the most of our experience and to do the best we can during this pandemic. I know most of us have been doing the best we can, but we want to not just do the best we can, but we want to be even better going forward. And so at this time, I'll turn program back over to Pastor Hodnett.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hodman, and panel. Fabulous job. We thank you for sharing your expertise with us, and you open some eyes and some doors and some minds today, and I'm sure that some individuals were helped. So thank you so much. Dr. Hodnett, did you want to share that um, hotline number and also
Sure,
another resource?
sure. For some individuals, throughout the course of us talking, you may have had some feelings or um, feelings that may have made you really kind of think that you might need additional support. We have some resources that you can access. The first one is for a suicide hotline. If you have any thoughts or feelings um, leading to you feeling as though you want to either harm yourself or are considering a suicide, we have this hotline that you can call, much like 911. This hotline is specifically for mental health, and it is 988. And so you can call that number and you can speak with a caring individual, and they can provide you with some support and also hopefully connect you with some individuals that can assist you where you are. Additionally, some of you may have heard about us discussing therapy and then thinking about, man, I want to pursue therapy myself. Well, if you want to find a therapist in your area, you can go to www.psychologytoday.com, and there you should be able to find some resources with regard to finding a therapist in your local area. Typically, if I'm not mistaken, you can put in your zip code and they'll give you therapists that you can find and with the tips that have been provided today by our panelists, you now know some things that you can begin to think about as you look through some of those profiles of therapists. And I encourage you, um, as you pursue God's best for your life through mental health, you will not only benefit yourself and your own experience, but all those who come behind you, your children, your coworkers, and those around you. So we want to leave a legacy of wellness and wholeness.
Thank you so much. And we just encourage anyone who is in need of some support to avail yourself to those resources. Um, Also, I just want to just reiterate that this is a series, the Let's Talk Life Enrichment series, and our next installment will be April 24th. April 24th, and we'll be dealing with COVID vaccination, danger or safety, what you need to know. Our facilitator, our guest will be Dr. Richard Berry. He is a physician out of White's Whitesburg, North Carolina, and he will be with us. And we just want you to put that on your calendar and join us for our next installment of Let's Talk Life Enrichment series. Also, we just want you to be aware that here at the Ebenezer Seventh-day Adventist Church, we are a resource of spiritual support. And so we just invite you that if you have any prayer requests, anything that you want us to pray for or pray with you about, um, you can just feel free to contact us. The numbers are on the screen: 706 73 1119. Leave a message and we'll return the call in a timely manner. Or you can just simply email us at ebenezerinfo202@gmail.com. And we will respond to you. And we just want you to know that we are here for you here at Ebenezer, and feel free to reach out to us. Once again, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you once again to the panel. And we trust that you were enriched today. So God bless you. And we look forward to seeing you again on April 24th as we talk about the COVID vaccine, what you need to know. God bless and have a wonderful day.